So it'd be good today, I think, to kind of break it down into a few sections where we can go through certain elements that we should think about, some of which I know we all do instinctively, and other things we kind of really always try and wrap our brains around. So let's go through it kind of piece by piece, and see if we can kind of make sense with it. So I think a sensible place to start for me is that premise, and that kind of not only what the premise of your show is, I suppose the concept we're talking about, but also later on what format that's going to come in, because like in terms of a TV pilot, not everything is just 1 hour drama, is it? There's lots of different options in that format bracket.
Absolutely. And I think I'm sure most of your fantastic community are already really familiar with this jargon. But for me, kind of, I think about premise as just the what if.
Right.
And I think about it interesting in the similar way when I'm working in a film as I do when I'm working in TV and vice versa. So, what is that what if question you're posing? What if this happened to this kind of person in this kind of world? Essentially, that's the premise of the show. And obviously, the premise for a show that is designed to be or imagined to be like 3 times 1 hour is really different to what you need if you're saying to me, this is 8 hours of drama returning for 3, 4 seasons.
Yeah, yeah.
Show. And that's when we'll talk about that a bit more, hopefully, later when we talk about story versus story engine.
Gotcha.
They're slightly different things. I think about them in slightly different ways.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that premise, the kind of how original is the combination.
Do you know what? And the thing is, it's so important as well, because I've read a lot of really great material, even in the sort of the nearly 3 years that Scribe Lounge has been around. And there's been times where I've read really great material that has great characters, a great world. I know where I want to be. But in terms of the premise, the what if, like you're talking about, that kind of central dilemma or conflict, somehow that's missing. And you think that what that ends up doing is just taking away that momentum, doesn't it? So by having that kind of like protective shell of a premise, it's almost like you can hide all your good stuff inside it if that's robust enough, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing where I'm looking for originality
Yeah.
more than anything else, because it is the fundamental building block of everything else that follows. So I'm looking for it to feel like basically a show I haven't seen before, a proposition I haven't seen before. And it
Absolutely.
might be that the characters are really familiar. We've seen those kind of people before, but we haven't seen them in this kind of world or facing this kind of problem or from this particular perspective.
So like a subversion of what we're kind of expecting,
Yeah,
right? So if you're taking on
absolutely.
some kind of thriller, or you're taking on, or you're taking on a familiar world, but you give it like a horror genre twist. Obviously, we're going to cover genre a bit later on, but it's finding those ways to subvert the expectations, isn't it? And
Yeah,
it's really hard to actually train your brain to think in terms of premises.
yeah,
It's really hard because ideas come from everywhere, don't they? They come from characters and just watching people on the street or reading articles, but getting your brain to train it to like think in premises is really hard.
yeah. And I think one of the best ways to do it is to just read a lot of short descriptions of shows you do love.
Yeah, like log lines or synopses.
Yeah, exactly. And just kind of be aware of how you're responding to stuff, and then why.
Yeah,
So why do I love the show? What is it in what's been described that makes me want to watch it,
yeah,
essentially? And then
absolutely.
ask those same questions about your own.
And it makes me think of like the daftest thing I can think of off the top of my head that's just popped into my head is like The Leftovers, where you think, okay, you take a premise of what if 2% of the world's population disappear? It's like immediately you go, oh, okay, I'd like,
Oh, okay.
yeah, okay, all right,
Interesting.
great. I
Interesting.
know there's going to be loads more like building blocks here, but okay, that's a premise. I'm in there and I can hang my hat on that, and then we can kind of take it from
Yeah.
there. You know?
And it's particularly challenging, I think, in TV drama and
Yeah,
pilots, because we're very used to thinking about TV drama as not really having a what if premise in the way a film does. Which is to say, unless you're doing crime, if you're doing character drama,
yeah,
it's really difficult, because what often happens is there isn't really a premise. I'm interested in these characters, and my favorite kind of alarm bell phrase is trial and tribulations. If the premise is the trials and tribulations of these characters, that's not really a premise.
Totally. And there will be lots of people thinking about their work. I know I've written one of those where it is just, I thought, oh, I love this world. I love these guys. You're going to want to hang out with them. I promise. Yeah,
Yeah.
there'll be some story in there. They've all got problems. They've all got issues. There's, you know, I am tackling with conflict, but actually there's no kind of protective premise there.
Yeah. And I think that's why for me, the what if question
Yeah.
is a really helpful
Right.
tool to think about premise through.
And so then how does that relate to format then? Because obviously, you know, I suppose is it about the longevity potential of your premise? So like the idea of writing 3 hours or 6 hours, which we're very much used to as a kind of UK model, or going massive and saying, I'm going to write 10 hours of this mass show. Well, I suppose you better have a pretty good premise then that's going to sustain.
Yeah, and I think we'll talk about this more a bit when we talk about story engine, because for me, the premise of something that's going to be 3 parts is going to read more like a film.
Yeah.
It needs to feel like it's potentially meatier than that, and it's going to generate enough story to last 3-4 hours. But the premise for a longer drama, a longer series, is even trickier. It just needs to, a bit like you just described with Leftovers, right? As soon as you say that what if,
Yeah. Yeah.
you're like, oh, that's hours of drama right there, right?
Yeah, totally.
You just know that that's going to have a huge story engine.
And so there was something that you mentioned in your notes when we were chatting about this, and it made me laugh because I've seen it so many times and I've done it before myself, so I'm totally guilty of it. And it's the classic sort of setup first episode where your whole pilot becomes about, you've got this great idea, but it's not present in your pilot episode because you're setting it all up. It's like you're introing everybody, and the whole thing just feels like a setup. Is that something you see a lot?
Yeah. I see it a lot, and it's my personal bugbear, which is really bad to have, but it is. And I can understand why it happens.
Yeah, I was going to say, I can see why it happens.
Yeah, because also when you think about, you know, a 3-hour or a 6-hour story, so we're talking about a serialized story here rather than something episodic.
Yeah.
Interesting, episodic shows tend not to suffer from the same problem. This is about telling one story over multiple hours. We tend to think of it like a film, which is, it's a contained story with a beginning, middle, and end. But the problem is, if you apply, you know, a film structure to a 4-parter, your first hour, you know, your inciting incident might not happen till the end of that episode. But
yeah,
for me as a viewer, I just can't. I'm not going to invest an hour without knowing what the story is.
Yeah.
So if you wait until the end of the first episode to get the story started and actually have that inciting incident,
and do you know what? Just hearing you explain it, I think I can see a common connection between why it happens for people and why I've done it in the past, is that it's that idea of that inciting incident. And somebody goes, oh, well, yeah, well, but it comes at the end of the pilot. And it's worth reframing and thinking, no, that inciting incident at the end of your pilot should be the springboard for your series. That's like the commitment to go on your journey for your series. But there should still be some inciting incident in the beginning of your pilot that just at least lifts off this journey and shows that something is going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Because for me, I think the pilot has to be like a template almost. And this is particularly true when you're doing longer than a 4-parter. When you get up to 6 and then you're thinking 2 seasons and beyond. Yep. Everything you want episode 3 to look and feel like and function like narratively, and in terms of genre and theme, everything about your show that would be there in episode 3 needs to be there in the pilot.
Yeah.
What we often have, I think, is people, like you say, setting things up, which means that the character dynamics that actually drive the whole piece aren't in place because those characters aren't necessarily interacting yet because you haven't maneuvered them into position.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And this is particularly problematic in sitcoms, which I know we're talking kind of TV drama probably today, but it's particularly challenging in comedy because everything inside a sitcom, and others can talk to this better than I can, but everything is about the interaction between those characters. The comedy comes from those particular relationships and dynamics. If you spend your whole first episode maneuvering people into that position so they only actually start interacting at the end of that pilot,
yeah, then
it isn't the show. And what often happens and is advised in sitcom, and I've seen work really well, is write your pilot, then write episode 2, and then bin your pilot. Because actually we didn't need any of that setup. We just wanted to get going.
And you know what I think it is as well, is I know it's been for me when I started out, it was because I had a lack of confidence in what the actual show was. And so therefore I thought, if I take it's why loads of scripts begin with an alarm clock going off, don't they? Because it feels like, okay, I need to show you my character's entire day from the beginning. I need to show them waking up, having a shower, getting dressed. You need to know what they're having for breakfast, and we need to meet everybody. And it's like, well, okay, but I understand why, because yeah, it's not having enough confidence to be able to plonk you in the middle of something. Again, I don't know why I've suddenly thought of The Leftovers today, but the opening scene is literally that premise right there in front of you in the supermarket car
Exactly.
park,
And
isn't it?
why would you not?